How do you maximize performance with your sales force? My name is Anthony Garcia, and I'm the host of the Catapulting Commissions podcast. Join me every week as we discuss topics such as performance or improving retention, and we do so by interviewing some of the top sales professionals and entrepreneurs around the world. Now, let's enjoy the show. Welcome to the Catapulting Commissions podcast. Have you ever wondered, what does it take to run a large-scale organization? Have you ever asked yourself, what does the CEO actually do? How do they implement change within an organization? How do they lead a sales culture? How do they lead an organization in times of uncertainty? How do they make a dramatic shift and change? Now, I know these are questions that I've always had, and it's been my journey on the Catapulting Commissions podcast to find talented sales professionals or talented sales leaders or leaders of an organization and bring them on the show and discuss these such topics with them. My guest today fits right in that category. When I created the Catapulting Commissions podcast, I created a hit list of people I wanted to have on the show to interview and gain some perspective on. And our guest today was one of the top names on that list. Let me tell you a little bit about Erin Hatzikostas. Now, Erin is the living, breathing business case for authentic leadership. She spent the first half of her career working in the corporate world, where at the age of 42, she became the CEO of a $2 billion healthcare financial institution. In just 3 years, she tripled earnings and set employee engagement skyrocketing. And just when things were going great, she decided to walk away so that she could help solve what truly breaks her heart: the immense lack of authenticity and happiness in corporate America. Through her company, Be Authentic Inc., Erin is provoking a movement to eradicate the all-too-fake corporate environment by inspiring and enabling an army of people to crush their career without compromising everything else. Erin is a prolific speaker, thought leader, and edu-tainer. She has spoken in front of thousands. She's also a regular contributor to Business Insider and several industry-leading publications. She also co-hosts an offbeat career and leadership podcast. She is a CEO, wife, mother, coach, runner, MBA, and Running Man enthusiast. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Erin to the Catapulting Commissions podcast. Erin, welcome to the show.
Holy crap, makes me want to get up and do the Running Man. Thank you for the info.
I love it. I'm glad to have you here. You have such a profound background that I am honored to have you on the show today. So, Erin, let's kick this thing off right out the way. I want to share with my audience how I was first introduced to you. So, I'm a big social media guy. I love looking at articles and finding things that kind of motivate me. And you had an article in December in Business Insider, and here's the title of the article, and it grabbed my attention. It said, "I left my $500,000 a year job to start my own company, and I couldn't be happier. Here are 3 things I have now that a 6-figure salary couldn't give me." Wow.
Well, first of all, the power of a good Business Insider editor, because that was not my original title, but they know how to spruce them up a little bit. And it's funny because I was so excited. That was my first article that I got sort of pitched and they took. And I was so excited about it. I couldn't wait for it to come out. And of course I started circulating on social media. And then a couple days later, I was like, oh shit. I just told the world what I used to make, right? Like a thing that we hold so dear to ourselves. And I hadn't even thought twice about it because I was so caught up in the excitement of being able to start to spread my thoughts. And then, I sort of had this oh shit moment, but whatever, it is what it is. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
No, absolutely. So one, that article, I'm telling you, Erin, it's inspiring people, right? Because we have talked in depth about this corporate culture that causes people to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to leave. I want to create my own thing. So other than now, we've shared with your audience, and now it's out there for the world to see what you were making before. So, we're going to get past that issue. Any regrets on leaving? Anything you wish you would have done differently?
No, and the biggest thing I want to say and impress upon people, I like things were good. I know in my bio, like, there's sort of this like pissed off about the fake corporate world. And yes, like that's what breaks my heart and that's what's fueling my passion to do what I'm doing now. But I actually didn't leave when I was unhappy. I actually left when like things were going really well. We had gotten through this massive turnaround. The company, it was an acquired company by the larger enterprise, and it just went through the typical struggles of integration, not being funded enough, operational issues, which lead to financial issues, and obviously cultural issues, employee engagement. And so, like the first year of leading that company was like, it was a shit show. Like my life was crazy, the types of things I dealt with. And, through sort of, leading authentically and also leading as a savvy businesswoman and having a great team. And, a lot went into that formula. Like, 3 years later, things were good. Like we went from being the company that the enterprise sort of like everybody hated, made fun of, like talked about in a negative way. And we went to being like this golden child. It was very surreal. And so things were good. Financials were roaring. We'd go into meetings, and we had a newer CFO that was overseeing kind of our business area. And like he was just like so positive. And sometimes I just look at him, I'm like, God, he wasn't around. Like he doesn't realize how big a deal it is that it's so good. And so, I so many people, right? We hear like, when I get a package or when I retire or like when something bad goes wrong, I'm going to leave. And I'll tell you, the power of I didn't leave with a package. I didn't leave with a parachute. I didn't leave with anything other than, some company stock that, because I technically retired, kept going. But the fuel that puts behind you, I think a lot of times, like if I were starting Be Authentic Inc., sitting on a year of severance or what, year, and I would have had like a solid probably year and a half. Would I have acted as boldly, as powerfully, as quickly? I don't think I would have. And so, yeah, I don't regret it. And let me just tell you one story that I can't remember if I put in that article. I definitely put it in one of my Business Insider articles, but I think your audience so needs to hear it. So, things were going good, but I was starting to get this itch that I always got. And my itch is mostly because I thrive off of exponential learning. And I was at a point where I wasn't exponentially learning anymore. And so started to itch for the next thing, and started to tell some of my sponsors, and they were kind of throwing new jobs at me, and I just weren't feeling right. So I was starting to think like, this is probably the time to go out and do something on my own, but I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if it's consulting. I don't know if it's running another, smaller VC backed company, healthcare company. Like, I don't know if it's career leadership, but it feels like I need to go. And I was on a business trip. I was on Southwest, so I was like in the cattle call line, and there's this really nice woman in her like mid 50s. We struck up a conversation, and so we decided to sit next to each other on the plane. And she was telling me about how she used to be in the corporate world, and then 10, 15 years in, she decided to leave and she started her own business. And so she had this HR consulting practice. So she's telling me all about it, and I'm asking her a million questions. I'm really intrigued. She's so happy. And she stops finally. I said, well, look, here's why I was asking so many questions. Here's my situation: 22 years, CEO of this company, turned it around, but I feel like I kind of want to go do my own thing. And then I said to her, but I think it's really a stupid time to do that. I said, my sort of personal equity is at, like, not financial equity, but my reputation's at its highest. Like, things are going really well. Like, it would be really stupid for me to do that right now. And she just looked at me, Anthony, so quickly, so succinctly, and so matter of factly, and said, who says this is the top? And I was like,
Mm.
oh damn, all this time it felt like, oh, I've conquered it all. And yeah, did I have higher places to go in the corporate world? Absolutely. um but when she said that, it really just hit me that when you're in the corporate world, your vision is of one mountain, right? And at the top of that mountain is the CEO, and at the bottom of the mountain are the sort of individual contributors, and everything is about climbing that mountain. And we all know not everybody's into like climbing, but the reality is, like, life is like a big mountain range. And just when you're like about ready to hit that summit, like I had for my individual company, like you look around and you're like, oh shit, like look at all these beautiful mountain ranges that I can go climb, that I need to go climb. Because if I don't, I will have no idea what kind of beauty is on the other side. And so that was really the turning point where I had thought about it, but thought, God, I'm really stupid to do this, because I was thinking like with my brain. And she changed everything. She had me, really see a whole new perspective.
How long after that interaction did you say, okay, I'm done?
Yeah, so that was I'd say about 9 months when I publicly
Okay.
did. So, then I kind of went into starting to ask people around and get curious about what that would be. In fact, it's funny. So the first person I called, there's this guy that I used to work with. Hadn't seen him for years, but we hooked up for some reason, some project or something. We sort of came back into each other's professional lives. And he used to work in corporate. He did small startups. He did consulting. Like he kind of did all the things that I was considering. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to give him a call. We have a good rapport, and I'm going to tell him what I'm thinking and see what he says. And you know what he said to me?
Hmm.
Don't effing do it.
Really?
He was that blunt. He, and he went on this rampage of like, when I worked in, venture capital, they're all a-holes. And like, here's why you don't want to do this. And, he told me all the reasons it was so dumb. And thank the Lord, I actually had an executive coach at that time. Sort of for the first time in my career, I'd been working with this woman, Carolyn Fryer Jones. And I remember going back, we had our session. She's like, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, well, and I had been focusing both on work stuff, but also like what's next stuff for my growth. And I told her about the story. And, she basically said, how did it make you feel? And I told her, because I was actually like, okay, I'm done. I'm like, I took one person's advice and I'm like, this is stupid. I'm just going to stay the course and keep, trying to get other corporate jobs. And she really helped me through it and really talked me through it. And so it is a process. And I will say the best thing I gave myself was space. So before Be Authentic Inc., I started another company. I started a software company, which sounds super freaking cool, except for I never started it. Like I never developed any software, but I had this whole idea, and I wanted to create this app that helped sort of basically crowdsource your schedule with other parents. The challenge I was trying to solve is that, especially with kids in sort of elementary school, like the activities, the school activities, the things you have to remember, the games you have to go to is like mind-boggling. And you get all these papers at home that tell you like, remember the band concert, remember this, and then you got to put it in your calendar. And so I had this whole idea about creating this app and technology, and I got super gung-ho, and I did the whole business case, and I started to talk with potential partners. And then I got to a point, and I had talked to a couple of mentors, and I was like, oh crap, I have to actually build stuff. Like I don't like building stuff. I like creating. I'm a creator, but I don't like building stuff. And so, I was doing that while I was still working. And, I will tell you, to anybody, like, give yourself the space. The chances that of like what you think you should do next. I mean, I was also, I had somebody recruiting me for a year to come run his company, a spinoff, and he was going to give me all this equity. And, it looks so good on paper. I entertained that. I entertained a lot of things. And I'm so happy that I gave myself the space and the time to really sort of settle in and figure out ultimately what I was meant to do, because it takes a lot of time. So yeah, so it was about 9 months till I told my boss, which, if you don't mind, is a funny story too.
Yeah, please fire.
So it's June now, June of 2018. I got reorged. So I got put under a different, executive vice president that was sort of overseeing me and my business. And I knew him pretty well. And so it had gotten out. I had told my sponsor, who was the president of the larger enterprise, and she had kind of put a full court press trying to keep me on board, trying to offer me new jobs. Mm-hmm. And so Dan says to me, first one-on-one, I hear there's a rumor that you're thinking about leaving. And, I was just at that point where I was ready to burst. And so I bursted. I was like, yep, this is what I need to do. And I'd like to make October my last date and blah, 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 blah. So now for fast forward to the weekend, and my husband and I always talk about me taking like this break, and in general the concept he was behind. He knew I was sort of working on it, but we're at a party the next weekend, and I'm talking to a friend, and I'm telling her this whole story about my conversation with my boss and how I told him, it's October, and my husband overhears this, and he's like, huh? I literally had not discussed any of this with him. I actually told my boss before he even knew that I had like set a date. So I had a
Oh,
little
wow.
backtracking, and I still had the same coach. And I remember telling Carolyn, and she was like, "Erin, you really messed up." Like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So I told my boss before I told my husband, but it's all worked out great.
I'm glad it worked out. I mean, I imagine that's an interesting conversation. I have always have I've shared with my wife, hey, if I ever make this decision on my own, she's like, I'm at the point in our marriage where I got your back. Just just I'm sure you'll make a wise decision, and it sounds like you made a wise decision yourself. Erin, I can't tell you how many people I've come across that um, are quote unquote in their mind at the top of their career, right? And as that lady told you on Southwest, who said this is the top? And it's funny, right? You run across very talented, successful, wealthy people. And I've always told people when, I ask anybody who comes in my organization, are you motivated by money? Are you motivated by recognition? Right. And when people tell me they're solely motivated by money, I always have the same response as, well, what happens when you have enough? Like, what happens when you make enough? And I always get one of two responses. Either one, and I always say the quality people, and I hate saying that because I have some people in my organization that have answered both. But when people are like, well, I don't think that money is the definition for me. I think success, legacy, impact. I like that because eventually, you know, you don't stress about money, right? I mean, the show's called Catapulting Commissions, but at a certain point, you're like, okay, what is money that I'm stressing about? It's not that impactful. It's not going to motivate me. It's not my ceiling. And so for you, CEO, large organization, to hear you say, "Hey, this isn't my ceiling," there's a listener right now saying that's inspiring. That's motivating. And I say there's listeners, probably me, because when I read it, I was inspired. I'm like, holy crap, dude. She took a step and bet and doubled down on herself and doubled down on yourself in such a calculated way that it's very praiseworthy, and I'm extremely impressed. And as I said, I've shared it before with you, and I'll share with my listeners. I have that article printed up on my wall because I think that what Erin discusses in there, the courage to bet on yourself, is incredibly impactful.
Thank you.
Let's retract here a second. So you come into this position of leadership, right? And you take over this organization, 3 years of consistent growth, $2 billion organization. It wasn't like that when you first walked in.
No.
Right? So can you walk us through that initial step in leading a team to be successful, right? Because in leading that process, you one had to get people to buy into you, buy into the vision, and then follow that with execution. And I know, it's CEO, it's not a salesperson, but you are. I mean, you sell the entire company in the correct direction. So can you walk us through that first year?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I had to sell our sort of big guy CEO to you as well. Yeah, so first of all, it was so interesting when I was handed the CEO position, I was handed interim CEO. I was COO at the time. They had moved the CEO over to another sort of big project, a huge acquisition. And I'll never forget the phone call. We were in Florida on vacation. We were at my parents' place getting ready to go to a water park. So like the one day I was not going to have my phone on me, right? I was just going to let loose. Like nobody knows me down there. I'm going to go have a blast and ride a bunch of water slides and act like I'm, 10 again. And just as we're getting ready to walk out the door, my boss calls me. And he doesn't call me off. And I was, I had one of those bosses, like just one of those big, very big, literally and figuratively. I had a good rapport with him, but a little intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, "Hey, Steve, what's up?" So he was like, "I'm being reassigned to this big project. We knew at the time it was to try to acquire Humana, and you're being named as interim CEO, but they're going to post the job to see if there's anyone better." Now, I don't think he said it exactly like that, but that's what I heard, right?
That's what I heard.
And at first I was like, how dare they? right? Like, what a crappy thing to hear. Like, we're giving it to you, but we're pretty sure there's somebody better out there and we're going to go. And then, probably over the next week or so, I was like, good. Like, I'm not sure I want it either. So, well, you guys are testing the waters. I'm going to do the same. And then phase 2 hit me, which was, I'm just going to freaking crush this thing. And they're going to have no choice but to hire me. Right. Like, I knew that I was in better position to prove out my worth than sit across from a bunch of executives and interview better than, some highly qualified and paper dude that they might bring in. So the first thing I did, I knew it was, business is a chess match. I always say that, wish you could move your queen and your king and your pawn and your knight and all that at the same time and just like smash your competition. But you can't, right? You only get to make one move at a time. And you got to pick that most strategic move. So at that time, because we'd been suffocating, we had flat earnings for 3 or 4 years. And with flat earnings, you don't deserve to invest in new things, right? And so I knew the first lever was we had to pull a really big financial lever. And, the most important thing I did, what I realized when I wasn't in charge, you guys your audience, I'm sure, can appreciate this, and you can probably relate. Like, you would hear nothing about financials for like months, and then there'd be a fire drill, right? Anthony, find me $2.2 million in your, you have till Friday, right? And you're like, now you're on the phone with every one of your leaders and everybody and like, look under the couches. And the first thing I thought was like, I'm not going to do that like that. We are going to start from the beginning, full transparency. So I started meetings. It was with all of my leadership team who already met on a weekly basis for a staff meeting. And instead we spent every other week in a financial meeting. And we literally, like, I had my CFO put up on his screen, like, we're going through our financials line by line. And I will tell you that very first meeting, so he pulls it up and it's like, it's almost like we're on CSI, when they're like figuring out a crime and like one person's like, yeah, but I saw this. And then the other person's like, but I saw this. And it always seems so cheesy, which actually my husband works in a 3-letter agency. I'm like, is it really like that? And he's like, yeah, it actually kind of is. Like, everybody kind of sees their pieces. So this meeting was like that. It was like, Brendan was like, wait, what's this line? What's this expense, Dominic? And Dominic drills down. He's like, oh, it's for this, this, and this. And then he's like, something feels, fishy. And long story short, he goes out to our vendor manager. We realized pretty quickly, and then it took us about a month to do the forensics, that we had been overbilled $1 million by one of our print vendors. Now, our bottom line at the time was our like pre-tax earnings was at 17 million. So $1 million is a lot of money to be overbilled. Huge, right? And so we just started to do things like that. We had a huge partner of ours. It was our largest distribution channel. And, we would kind of half joke about how we knew we were kind of underwater with them. Like, they were huge volume, but like, if we cost accounted, we probably were losing money. Well, nobody had actually cost accounted. And probably shouldn't in the past, right? When you first start these things up, it was sort of a market breaking thing. So you don't even know how to price it. You don't know what to expect. So we went back and we spent a solid month, like, doing the hard work to do some cost accounting to like do a P&L for that channel. And we had lost, I think when we looked at it, we had lost the year before like $17 million. So we essentially had lost our full profits on just one distribution channel of ours, which was bringing us great top line numbers, but it was killing us from the bottom line. And we went to bat. We played a game of chicken. One of the toughest negotiations. In fact, my boss at the time, again, I'm an interim CEO status. She was a really tough lady. And I'll never forget when she said, Erin, what are you going to do if you lose your largest distribution channel? And I just looked at her and I said, I won't. And I still have the email. I think I saved it because there was an email where I was like, this one's going to take guts, right? All leaders want like these big levers, but they don't have the guts. And so went through a very gutsy negotiation. It was insanely successful. We got a 50% increase in our revenue. That ended up being an extra like $11 million the next year. And so, the first phase was just like transparency into the thing we needed most, which was financials. The second was fighting for the business. So I went through a whole time where there was a lot of question marks whether we were the right business to still, have within the enterprise. And that's a story for another day because it's a really, really long one. But it culminated with me having a really big girl moment, sitting on, the top floor of the building with all men, except for two women, but mostly men, um, fighting, in the toughest time to fighting for our business, and walking out in 35 minutes with a decision that even my boss's boss said would never happen. Um, and so first it was like paying that chess match, getting the financials, and then I had this moment. So it's about a year later. We've gotten through a lot of this. We now have money to invest. Like, we're feeling momentum. On stage in front of, we had about 200 account managers and salespeople. And I'm talking, and I was talking about some of the progress we'd made. And I just saw this like joy in their face, like this pride as I was talking about it. And I got off the stage and I thought, you know what? We have kind of accidentally started building a good culture. Right. Part of that came from me, people like me. We were sort of just like getting lucky and doing the things that were making people happier. And I thought, what would happen if we made that our single biggest investment, our single biggest focus, and our single biggest strategic differentiation? Like, all in, top of the list, culture. What would happen if we did that? And so we went on a journey. We partnered with a leadership group who really coached us and helped us, the Alchemy Group, who I'm forever grateful have changed my leadership skills for the better, like you could never, imagine. And we systematically invested in our culture in very tangible ways. And to the point where one year, our employee culture index on our employee engagement survey went up 11 percentage points in 1 year alone.
Wow.
And this was, we had a huge service operation, phones, claims, like, there were a lot of people that had tough jobs, had tough perspectives, and we were really able to turn it around. And that's was definitely my proudest moment. So it was really about, like, what lever do you have to move first? And for some, actually for us, before I was CEO, it was operations, and people in front of me really pulled that lever. It might be finances, it might be sales. That's something I left on the table. Our top line was still a challenge when I left. Like, you as a leader can't solve it all, but you can figure out what is the biggest puzzle piece to move and just go all in on that.
There's so much profoundness in what you just shared, and just piggybacking from the end. As a leader, we can't solve everything, right? And I think, I as a sales leader and a sales manager, I manage a team, multi-million-dollar business unit, and there's times where, hey, I can't solve this. I have to either trust you to solve it, or we're going to have to leave this unsolved because I have higher priority things. So to hear you say that is really, really phenomenal feedback. Hey, I wanted to take a quick minute and interrupt this episode for a second. I hope you're enjoying what you've heard thus far. Are you a sales professional, or do you manage a team of sales professionals? I imagine you know someone who struggles with complacency. I'm talking about the sales rep who has all the tools to be a top performer, but just can't seem to get past the mental hurdle that is holding them back. I completely understand, and I relate with you. That is why I've created a detailed approach on how to get out of this stage of complacency and put yourself in position to achieve your next sales goal. Be sure to visit my website, catapultingcommissions.com. Once there, you can find the link to pick up a copy of my international best-selling book, Catapulting Commissions. Now, let's get back to our show. What I love that you started with, you go into this role, right? Kind of get the chip on your shoulder. I'm not the intern. I'm the real deal. You can call me an intern. It's like, hey, you're the junior varsity team. We're like, I can completely understand how that could piss somebody off. It would piss me off.
I started shooting the threes. I was like, screw it. I'm going to start batting the threes in.
Yeah, I'm going big, dude. I'm going hard. And you know what? I'm either going to earn this job or I'm going to get fired trying to. One way or the other. I'm not going to be the intern.
Brother.
Yeah. So, but you started with the message that you said you were going to be transparent. And opening up that doors and transparency, I have leaders that are co-leaders or that work with me. And when I have this conversation of transparency, some people feel that transparency leads to vulnerability and exposing vulnerability to the people around you. Did that ever cross your mind that, hey, if I expose this transparency and vulnerability, I would be viewed as a weaker CEO, a weaker leader? How did that, did that come to mind? And what was the feedback on that transparent approach?
Yeah, so we all come with sort of certain DNA qualities that are like at the root of us. One of mine is transparency. And in fact, I joke about, so I'm from Northern Michigan. I'm from a small town, Midwest girl, Michigan girl. And I think a lot of it's rooted there. I always say I'm transparent to a fault.
Okay.
When you're in the bathroom line with me and we got 30 seconds, or when you're in the Southwest Airlines, you may learn my entire story of my life. So transparency had always been something that I personally had felt comfortable with. Um, in that, vulnerability, which is one of the key like ingredients to authentic leadership, which is my jam, which I didn't figure out was my jam until sort of the end. And I looked back and was like, oh, that's what it's called. Um, it's such a key component to that. And there's a fine line, right? Like being vulnerable and transparent isn't getting up in front of your town hall and like, hey people, I just couldn't sleep last night because we've got an issue with like our systems, scalability, and I'm super worried about. It's really about showing that you're human, showing that you need them to help you figure it out. And I think you're better off crossing the line than not, like meaning crossing a little bit to showing like that you might be worried about something that they shouldn't. I think it's one of the most powerful things you can show. And I'll actually, that's for your employees. What I think was one of my most, because I also really earned a lot of respect of the senior leaders that were sort of surrounded me in the broader enterprise. And, some of it was like, I'm sure you and listeners can relate with this. Like, right, you go to a quarterly business review
Hmm.
and you're with your peers and you have your dashboards. And it's like propaganda fest. It's like green fest. Like here's all the good things we're doing. Like all the 10 sales, of course, a lot of times people don't talk about that you just lost one of your biggest clients or that you like got beat out by your biggest competition, one of your prospects. And the leaders that you're talking to are not stupid. They know business is not perfect. So one of the best ways that I think I gained a great reputation, like I would go into those quarterly business reviews, I would go in with reds. Like I would, because you can kind of massage these and your
Right.
metrics. Sales was a red for us until the day I left. I wasn't able to solve it, but it wasn't truly evergreen. And so I think by always being really honest about what, our big boss, always the best agenda structure you can ever put together is this: what's working well, what's not working so well, what are you doing about it, and where can I help? And so Mark used to always sort of impress upon us, but people wouldn't do it. They would just go in and talk about what's working well, what's working well. And then when he asked a few questions about like some big deal that he knew wasn't going well, they would tell them. And so I think that transparency and that honesty, I never went into a meeting where a leader was like, is Erin giving us the whole story? That was so important to me. I used to, when I knew I was leaving, I would tell people all the time, the last freaking thing I want is for me to leave this company and then somebody be like, oh, Erin was hiding that, sales weren't, getting to where we need to be. Like, I never wanted my reputation after I left being of somebody that like hid things. And I think that transparency, it, just gains you so much credibility, both with your sort of team down the line, as well as with those above you.
Absolutely. I think, how you approach that transparency, I uh I think more leaders need to implement that. I think there is so much value in the people who are following you seeing, hey, here's the good, here's the bad, here's the ugly, and here's our plan to it. And then when you say, hey, I'm showing you the reds and I'm sharing with you some of the negatives, for me, if you're my leader, I'm like, okay, I'm buying into you. I got your back, partner. Let's ride this thing out. Let's figure it out together. And I've had leaders before that have done exactly what you said. Here's the good. Here's the good. But there's a tidal wave forming behind us, and you're not going to know about it till it's too late. I have a running joke with my team that I currently lead. I'm like, look, guys, I'm gonna tell you if we're gonna fall off a bridge. I'm not gonna let the bridge just I might not have an answer, and my answer might be, "Hey, we're going to hold hands on the way down," but you're not going to be blindsided by the bridge running out of road. So
Yeah.
that I think that definitely helps create the next thing I want to talk about, that culture you talked about, right? So you start with this transparent approach, you get people bought into you, and from what it sounds like, you change the organization by doubling and tripling down on creating that culture. If you had to give me a synopsis, what were the 2 or 3 things that you said, okay, here's how we're going to implement culture? And my follow up to that is, how did that trickle down to the entire organization?
Yeah. So I wrote a Business Insider article on this. I'll
Awesome.
have to make sure I send it to you. But yeah,
Please do.
I yeah, there, and it's funny. There were like 3 things. So let me see if I can get those 3 things right. So the first is invest in leadership training. So many people, I have CEOs that I coach. I have one in particular that will bring me issues and sort of call them culture. And I'm like, no, that's leadership. Like that's basics. And so the foundation of any good culture in a company is you've got to have really good leadership training. And the training that we implemented was so different. It was so sustaining in their approach, and there was a lot to that. But everything was built on the foundation of trust is always there, and it's either going up or it's going down, or it's staying the same. But you always have to gauge that and how you sort of manage that trust. So we really invested in that leadership training. We did a 2.5-day immersion for my whole team. We did every single people leader, all 100 people leaders in our organization went to one of 3 trainings we did in different locations throughout the country. So they did a full day training, and then we finished it up with a leadership summit that I described to my big boy CEO as the proudest 2 days of my entire career. So we brought everybody in, even women, quote unquote supervisors, which I always hated that word, but like our call center frontline managers that had never, ever been invested in their life, never traveled. I remember going out to see our Fort Wayne office in Indiana, and one of them was like, was that email really for us? Are we really going to Hartford in April? And I was like, yeah, you are. And so that was number 1. Number 2 is you have to give up power, which is really, really hard for me and really hard for most leaders. So what you want to do in these situations, you're like, it's another initiative. Let's build a team. It starts with my management team. And instead we built what we called a cultural board of directors. So I really wanted something that wasn't like a committee. It wasn't I wanted to signify like you guys run the show. And we were very, very purposeful in this board of directors and tried to get the most diverse board of directors we could, whether it was team they were on, location they were in, level they were at. So sort of those kinds of diversity, so that we only had a couple people from my direct team, that were at senior management positions. We had a number of individual contributors. We had a number of middle managers. We had 5 or 6 office locations. So we had somebody in every office location. We had somebody from work at home. And then we really enabled them. We sent them on field trips. I actually went with them. We went to GE. We did like look and sees. We, sort of got inspired. And then when we developed the leadership summit, and God, it went against every type A bone in my body. We gave them full control. And I'll tell you, we had the leadership development company who were paying a lot of money, quite frankly, to help us do this. And at first, I remember I had kind of had a chief culture officer I had named. So I did have a right-hand person so it wouldn't go by the wayside, because I knew me. Like I'd start out, I'd get really excited, and then, things would fall by the wayside. And I remember Stephanie and I talking after the first meeting, and we're sort of like, oh, Alchemy's not really doing anything. They're just telling us what to do, right? That like visceral reaction, like, what are we paying you for? You're not doing the work. And we couldn't have been more wrong. What they did is they made sure that conference was developed by the people for the people and delivered by the people. And so when we had those 2 days for that leadership summit, instead of seeing a bunch of consultants on the stage, which you're like, these are great, but like, what happens when they jump on a plane and leave us, right? After this is all done, it was all delivered by their peers for the most part. And so there was this sustainability. In fact, I remember my final speech, which also is a funny story too, but my point here is my final speech too. I remember like somebody was like, well, you got to tell them all the things we're going to do to follow up to keep this going. And I had like one thing that we were going to do, and everything else, because these were leaders, was on them. And so we really we dispersed it. And, even afterwards, we kept leadership meetings going, like once a month, these new, like all leaders meetings. And it's hard to keep doing. So everybody loved the conference, felt enabled, like people were so happy they were part of it and delivering it. And then we get back to normal life and we're like, okay, we're having these leadership monthly meetings. We're going to have an office volunteer to lead it every time. Crickets, right? Like, so you go back to the same, like, you're like, come on, guys. And so it was this constant process. And I remember that nobody volunteered. And so finally I was like, all right, Omaha, you're up. So-and-so and so-and-so you're leading, walking away. And our first leadership meeting that they ran was amazing. They had this like whole football theme, and they had all these other people coming in to talk. And like, it wasn't just like talking heads like me. And so, giving up that control is critical. And then the third really most important part of all of this, when I started building a good culture, I was like, I got this. Like, I'm an inspirational person. This is sort of my jam. I have this energy. I love to tell inspiring stories. Like, I'm just going to inspire the shit out of everybody. And then I realized, like, that's not sustainable. And what I will tell leaders is you actually have to create a culture platform. And what I mean by that is you have to, the analogy I always give is, those like flying discs where you pull the ripcord and they go flying.
Uh-huh.
Like, your job is to like pull that ripcord and have that culture fly. And yeah, every once in a while that thing comes to the ground and you got to pull it again. So you don't walk away, but you have to create systems to make it a cultural platform. And I'll give you the most so when I tell people that, I would imagine I'd be like, oh, that sounds great. But what the hell is that? It's super simple things that get you there. So one of the most powerful things we did single-handedly helped us fly that flying disc. When I got back after that leadership summit, our weekly staff meetings used to be like everybody else's, right? Issue number 1, issue number 2, issue number 3, right? People throw in their agenda items and we just start solving. And some of it was forward looking if the marketing department had something, but like other than that, it was like, right, issue resolution. And instead I just added one agenda item at the top of every, and I remember my assistant was like, really? You want this on I'm like, every meeting, every week when we meet. And it was called Slow Down and Inspire. And we started this process where we spent the first 10 minutes. And I will tell you, in the times we're in right now, like, this is the perfect time and the simplest thing you'll ever do. And we would just spend 10 minutes. And it was, at first it was a lot of like leadership best practices. I mean, to the point where I was like, I'm a shitty leader. These guys are so much better than me. Like, they were doing all this stuff, book clubs with their team and like videos. And I was like, damn, like they are so good. But then it also became like, so-and-so on my team, just lost 150 pounds and he shared it with us. And, I just ran my first half marathon and like my kid just got this amazing award. And so it became this, 360 degree, anything goes. And so we started doing at our staff meeting. Well, what happened was, of course, my senior directors who also had their own staff meetings did the same. And it started just like morphing to the point where everybody was doing it in their own ways. Even our daily operational show calls that we would have, like when it was like, all the things that are broken, let's get together and make sure everything's running. Mondays became motivational Monday. Fridays became like something Friday, like fun Friday. And they would share things. Like, people that were leading those meetings went from just like this boring, calculated, depressing, and they started to add their own twist on Slow Down and Inspire. And it was that moment when it started to kind of proliferate that I kind of stood back and I was like, my job is done here. And that's, I think we all need to strive.
Slow down and inspire. Who would have thought, right? You start something and you take this cultural platform, as you described, and you said, we're going to, what I hear from that is you implement it from the top and it trickles down. And I think starting, you being the CEO, right? I mean, you're the highest person in your business unit. Here's what we're going to do, guys. And as everyone buys in and rolls down, and what's exciting is you're giving people an opportunity to feel invested, to feel valued. And I think that's probably one of the things that sales leaders, and I'm gonna spin this a little bit on you. I think sales leaders forget that on the other side of that sales number, on the other side of that black number or red number or sales forecast, there's still a human there, right? There's still a husband, a wife, a father, a mother, a single, whatever it may be. There's a human there that has all the emotions, all the feelings. And if we don't care about that person, they're never going to care enough to work hard for this company, this job, this organization. And you mentioned, and you get these, these fire drills. You can only call a fire drill on somebody if you've invested in that person. It's almost like, it's a really trying time right now. I had a call with my team earlier and we were talking about revenue. And I was like, hey, for me, honestly, there's no way in the world I'm going to call, and my team works in healthcare. I'm not going to call my healthcare providers right now and try to drive revenue. I'm going to call them like, hey, man, do you need some toilet paper? How can I be of service? I'm not calling them that drill because the timing's not right. Where I'm going with that is leaders and organizations, they call these fire drills. But if you haven't done that emotional investment into your person, into your team, they're not going to respond. And I've learned in my experience of watching organizations and all the studying that I have done in leadership, in sales leadership specifically, sometimes it's lip service, sometimes it's executed. And with your slow down, inspire, the three things you did to change culture, which is invest in your leaders within a leadership training program. You gave up power. Kudos to you. I mean, that is one of those things that I'm sure was very nerve wracking. It's easy to say right now. It's easy to talk about, but at the time, I imagine you were like, what the hell did I just do? Why did I do that? Everything's going to go by the wayside. And then implement that cultural platform. I think that is one thing that every person listening here, if you have a sales team, that has to be implemented today, right now. And, I don't want to date this, but, we be silly. I mean, there's so much going on right now in America that as a leader, your time to lead is now. This is it. I mean, this is it. This is what we practice for. This is what we train for. This is what we do. So good for that. So you talked about the keys to authentic leadership, and one of them you said was vulnerability. What are the others?
Yeah, it's so funny because the first time I gave my first keynote on this, I was like, here's what authentic leadership is. It's humor, humility, and storytelling. And, the speech went great. I had all these kudos, but one guy came over to me. It's so funny. This older gentleman, board of directors for a company that I actually work with. And he was like, it's great. He said, but like, that's not me. And I was like, you're right. That's an oxymoron. By like me actually telling you what is authenticity is sort of like this natural oxymoron. So what I tell people, so a couple of things. One, I wrote another article, which was about how to know you're not an authentic leader. Right. So the concept is like it's kind of wrong to define it, but it's pretty easy to tell you the shit that is not authentic. So, I think there are some key tenets, and I sort of put like 5 H's behind these tenets. So first of all, humor is like the international language, right? So I would say humor is a key tenet. Humility, I think, is another H key tenet. You need to be heartfelt. You need to be honest. And you need to be, I call it hip. And I don't mean hip like wearing like the coolest clothes and stuff, but you need to constantly be on the edge of what's new. You need to be kind of unexpected. One of my favorite quotes ever is by Colin Powell. And it's people, you're a good leader when people follow you out of curiosity.
Wow.
And, I always say, I have my own saying, which is people respect authority, but they follow authenticity. And the reality is, I've had some leaders in my time frame, that, in my time that I can think of, like, they may have not been the most polished. They may have not been, the nicest, but there was something really curious about them. They were just a little unexpected. They were a little whimsical. They were a little leading edge. And you were sort of like, I don't want to say it's like, rubbernecking on the highway where you're always curious, right? But there's a little, you also have to leave, that's what I mean by hip. You have to always be a little bit curious as well. And it's so simple. It's so simple. Like, one of the biggest things I always hound on and like give as a tangible example, and there's many of them, but like your communications. One of the things that's my kryptonite, I sat amongst a bunch of peers that would send out the typical communication. They'd have Anthony's face on it, headshot. It's like, yeah, no shit. Everybody knows what Anthony looks like. It would have a bunch of big words. It would make you sound really smart. It might be about an org change, or it might be about a new operating plan. People don't read that stuff. Like, I don't read that stuff. They don't. In fact, I remember our president, sort of my big boss, used to send these out all the time, right? She had a bazillion people writing for her and her whole comm team, and she'd send these super fancy communications. I didn't read a one. And then one day, when the company had gone, you're in healthcare too, right? So we'd just gone through like huge losses as it related to the private exchanges, like financials were terrible. And she sent out this communication, no fancy picture, no fancy, you could tell she actually wrote it. And she was reflecting very honestly and authentically about like how she felt about some of the decisions they had made and what she would have done different. I read every single word. And I responded to her. I mean, I knew Karen, but I would never respond to those other communications. Like, who would they actually go to? Right. I hit reply. And I had some nice words to her for like what she had said. And so, things like that, right? You write your communications, like tell a story, connect with people, like sound like a human. Your out of office messages, stop sounding like a robot. What a great opportunity to like tell people something fun. Like, I'm going to visit one of my favorite customers. I'm on the road visiting one. I'm taking a much needed break with my family, up in the mountains. There's just really simple things you can do to break the mold. Stop like following the rules and start like creating the next set of rules, and just being a little more human, a little more different, a little more unexpected. And next thing you'll know, you'll be called an authentic leader.
I dig it. Just to put proof in the pudding here. One, all of Erin's articles that she mentioned will be located in the show notes. So you can go ahead and click on the show notes under catapults and commissions, and we'll give you a link to those articles. But two, I read your LinkedIn profile. You talk about authentic leadership. Your LinkedIn profile is the most authentic. I mean, you talked about, I wasn't that good at this job. I mean, it was just,
You read it. I've never heard somebody that actually saw it.
I thought it was amazing. I've read hundreds of them. This was the best one.
Like 3 a.m. You know how like sometimes you can't sleep, and when you're an entrepreneur, you sort of just give up, and you're like, well, I work whenever I want to work anyway. I don't know what I was doing, and like all of a sudden, next thing you know, I got knee deep in rewriting all of my So what he's talking about is if you do the fold out on all my positions, I tell a story. It's basically like if you and I were sitting having a drink, and you're like, dude, what did you do? Like, how did you get this job? Or like this? That's how I tell it in LinkedIn. So it's funny that you found that and read that. Exactly. Like little things like that. And you stick out. People like don't want to hear the same old, same old. They want to hear somebody fresh and new and different.
That component, right? Your 5 keys, that hip one, I think that's more impactful now than it has ever been, right? Because the workforce is like in this generation gap, right? You have a combination of 3 generations in one workforce, right? And people are all vying for that top spot, or companies are vying for top talent. I know it. I've recruited top talent. I've been recruited from competitive companies, and it's that component of that hipness. That would be the one where it'd be like, that's different, because everyone can be the corporate mold. Everyone can fit the cookie cutter of here's what a regional director sounds like. Here's what a CFO sounds like. To hear your CEO like, nah, dude, I'm on vacation drinking beers. Do not call me. That's my out of office. Leave me alone. I don't want to hear from you. It would be like, that's pretty funny. I dig that, right? I'm sure someone's not.
Work for that person.
Yeah.
Yes, people. And by the way, all businesses is one big freaking talent war.
It is.
It is just one big talent war. And I used to laugh about that. I'm like, my other sort of, no offense, but some of my colleagues, I'm like, dude, I'm stealing your talent left and right. And it's not that hard. I'm just being approachable and authentic and relatable and a little unexpected. That's all it takes. You get the best ones come your way.
That is awesome. So how is Be Authentic right now helping people get to that stage? Because we've had a great dialogue here, and very inspiring. And I think to hear your approach on leadership is groundbreaking. And I hope someone's listening to this right now that has a team that's gonna be like, you know what, I'm just gonna be more human. I'm just gonna be me and let you see me for who I am. And you can make your decision after that. But I dig that. How do people get, like, how does someone learn to be an authentic leader? And I imagine it's a little difficult because I don't want to call you and say, hey, Erin, I'm an unauthentic leader. Help me. Or, is it more of a, hey, I'm at a rough spot. How do I get to this next spot? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I kind of attack the problem from two different directions. And the horrible analogy I use sometimes is so, first of all, like if you're trying to take down a dictator, like a Hitler or something, which is kind of how I feel with some of the, corporate BS, right? Like there's two ways you can do that. You can either go talk to Hitler and their men and try to convince them of your way, or you can build an army to defeat them. And so the foundational part of my business is building an army to defeat them. And so what I mean by that is I'm starting with everyday people, and some of those may be leaders and some of those may be frontline employees, maybe, and everybody's a leader, of course, but, varying parts of their career. And the focus is on really helping people at the heart of it have a career without compromise, is the way I put it. Because amongst all of this, my biggest thesis is that the best talent is actually opting out or opting down. In particular, females, but I'm not a female only company. I always say authenticity is gender neutral, but advantage women. And so, one of the biggest things holding the best talent back is they're fearing that they're going to have to compromise. And that's could be their marriage, it could be their kids, it could be their health. And for a lot of them, it's essentially who they are, right? Having to change who they are to be successful and be in that job. So I attack that problem sort of, let's call it from the army or the bottom up. I have a podcast, as you mentioned, it's called Because with Erin and Nicole. B, the letter B, and then space CAUSE, because, which is very different. So we call it an offbeat career and leadership podcast because it's the two of us who half the time we do interviews, but half the time it's the two of us, two friends, like catching up. We're both executives. She runs a nonprofit foundation. It's really funny. A lot of it is coaching her actually through her significant challenges in her own career real time. But she's extremely witty. She's one of my most unique friends I've ever had in my life. Yale graduate, Johns Hopkins, but super funny and super imperfect. So that podcast is most importantly not just saying the right words, but we're demonstrating authenticity, right? So I firmly believe that you learn more by what you see than what you hear. And so the podcast is, our big way to do that. I also have career coaching program that I'm relaunching that's called Be Brilliant. And actually I'm launching it now. It's going to be evergreen, out there all the time. I tried to do all the things that I was supposed to do and have these launches, and guess what? It didn't feel authentic. And I was like, why is this not working? And so I'm just going to have a ongoing, it's both group coaching and then also a 17 module online course that's both me coaching and like 15-minute videos, and then really fun, inspiring course worksheets to help propel people forward. And I put that together because I also got pissed that I got an executive coach when I finally was an executive. And I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And the reason is because they're so freaking expensive, right? And so the people that need an executive coach can't afford it. And so the program, it's affordable, it's fun. Like one of the videos I do from like my bathtub, it's typical Erin, where I'm not just talking, I'm demonstrating authentic leadership all along the way. And then also, I do believe though, from the top down is important too. And so on a select basis, I work with CEOs, primarily CEOs in the healthcare space. I have 3 clients active right now. You know what's so funny about that, Anthony? I actually call it coach salting. So the way I position, I'm like this beautiful intersection of both a business advisor, because I understand the business,
right?
But I'm also a coach. And what's been really beautiful about getting to shape some of these really great leaders is that authenticity ends up being the thread that runs through it as well. And so I don't sit down with them and be like, okay, what are we going to do authentic today? but the stuff they come up with and we come up with together and the things, like one of my clients, Jeff, he is out there like already a better leader than I ever was, and doing things like videos that are like apologizing for mistakes. And now they're using their supply chain to bring in PPE, which is not their core business, but they make a pocket nebulizer. And so they're doing like all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know they were doing this. And so I also really love, on a very select basis, working with some great leaders at the top that are going to be the next generation of leaders, to not only crush their business, because I get how to crush business, but also to become the authentic leader that I know they can become. And I just help them become a better leader. So lots of fun stuff. And, I always say I really, truly don't want it to be thought of as a business, but as a movement. And so doing everything I can. I'm out there right now doing free coaching sessions that I put out to my followers and to my email list, because I'm just like, oh my God, people need help. So doing all that I can. I'll get back on the speaking circuit when that comes up. And as I told you before, I'm working on my book too, because I am crazy and I love to do all the things.
Awesome. What Catapulting Commissions family, did you hear that? That is 100% how to get with Erin in the Be Authentic program. You touched on it. I think that value of having that course, I fall victim into that, where I remember wanting to hire a coach 8-9 years ago. And the coach I wanted to hire was Hal Elrod, right? And at the time, Hal Elrod was up and coming, and he had a reasonable fee. And I was like, man, I'm not making that much money. I don't know. And so I passed off the buck on it. A few years ago, I went back. I'm like, hey, let me see what it would cost. Well, Hal's fee has grown with his popularity. I mean, his book's been transcribed in 61 different languages and has gone on to massive reach. But this past, almost year and a half now, 2 years, I've been working with the coach. And my business aspect in so many different ways has improved to the point where, I'm running multiple things at once, but my efficacy and how I see things, and when you have that executive coach in your corner, that's outside your organization, that's an outside influence, it really does help take that to that next level of thinking. And, when you have a coach that you pay for, you never show up to your calls unprepared. Like, I am not going to waste my coaching fees or whatever it is to show up unprepared. So I think that having that program that people can run through on their own through these modules is definitely something that you should take advantage. And if you're interested in that, I'll have that link also in the show notes. Erin, how do people track you down? How does someone get a hold of you? How does, what's all the social media, website? I think the podcast will put that there too, which is funny. I have listened to it myself, and it's authentic as can be. So what are some of the ways people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so beauthenticinc.com is the website. That's just the letter B, because we're sassy like that, Authentic Inc. Social platforms, I'm most active on LinkedIn, actually. So I'd love for you to follow me there on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram at be_authentic_inc. And I'm on Facebook at beauthenticinc.com. And you can write me anytime. You can just write to hello@beauthenticinc.com. I love hearing from people. Jump on my email list. I mostly send just a monthly newsletter, and it's authentic as hell. It's storytelling. It's fun stuff. And then, of course, I poke you and prod you when I have new things like my course and things like that. So any way that works for you, love to have you part of the movement.
Well, we will definitely share that movement. Again, you can find Erin in the Be Authentic Inc. program, all in the show notes. Erin, I want to say thank you. I know we have spent so much time today, and I honestly feel like I have so many unanswered questions, but out of the respect of time, I'm going to get you to come back on the show down the road. Does that sound fair?
That sounds awesome. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. Great. Well, Erin, thank you for joining the Catapulting Commission show, and we'll catch you on the next one. Well, that does it for today's episode on Catapulting Commissions with Anthony Garcia. If you found some value in today's show, please be sure to head over to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. Don't forget to subscribe to Catapulting Commissions. That way you get notified of new episodes every week. Lastly, please take a screenshot of today's show and share it on Instagram. Every week, I'll be giving away a signed copy of my best-selling book to one person who tags me at Anthony P. Garcia 99 and includes the hashtag catapulting commissions. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to helping you achieve higher commissions.